The September 11th attacks of 2001 remain one of the most traumatic and consequential events in modern history. An event that permanently altered global politics, security practices, and public trust while leaving behind a long trail of unresolved questions that continue to provoke debate more than 2 decades later. On the morning of September 11th, 4 commercial airliners were hijacked by members of the extremist organization Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden, and deliberately turned into weapons against the United States. 2 of the planes were flown into the north and south towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, killing more than 2,000 people and triggering the catastrophic collapse of both skyscrapers, while a third aircraft struck the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, killing hundreds of military personnel and civilians. A fourth plane, believed to be targeting either the United States Capitol or the White House, crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers courageously attempted to regain control from the hijackers, preventing further mass casualties at the cost of their own lives. The attacks stunned the world not only because of their scale and brutality, but because of their simplicity, relying on box cutters, basic flight training, and coordination rather than advanced weaponry, exposing vulnerabilities in systems previously thought secure. While the overarching narrative of what happened that day is widely accepted and supported by extensive investigations, many specific details surrounding the attacks have never been fully explained, leaving room for uncertainty, speculation, and persistent mistrust. One such mystery involves Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker of American Airlines Flight 11, whose actions in the final hours before the attacks remain difficult to rationalize, even after years of scrutiny. On the evening of September 10th, Atta and fellow hijacker Abdulaziz al-Omari unexpectedly traveled by car from Boston to Portland, Maine, despite Boston being their intended departure city the following morning. Surveillance footage confirmed that the 2 men checked into a hotel, withdrew cash from automated teller machines, visited local stores, and appeared calm and methodical, exhibiting no signs of stress or urgency. The next morning, Atta boarded an early flight back to Boston, where he reportedly received a phone call from fellow hijacker Marwan al-Shehi, believed by investigators to be the final signal confirming that the operation was proceeding as planned. Why Atta chose to add this detour remains unclear, with theories ranging from attempts to avoid heightened airport security to counter-surveillance measures or contingency planning in case of flight disruptions, yet no conclusive evidence has ever emerged to explain the decision, making it one of the enduring logistical puzzles of the plot. Another haunting mystery centers on the disappearance of Sneha N. Philip, an Indian-American physician who vanished around the time of the attacks, and whose fate has never been definitively established. Philip was last seen on the evening of September 10th near her apartment in Lower Manhattan after shopping at a department store, and there is no confirmed evidence placing her at the World Trade Center on the morning of September 11th. Her family believes she may have gone to Ground Zero to provide medical assistance, but most doctors who responded to the attacks treated survivors outside the towers, and bodies recovered from street-level casualties were generally identifiable. Extensive investigations conducted by the New York Police Department and a private investigator, hired by her husband, failed to uncover physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, or digital records that could conclusively explain her disappearance. Complicating the case was Philip's troubled personal history, which included job termination, struggles with alcohol, and legal issues stemming from a harassment complaint that was later dismissed, raising the possibility that her disappearance may have been unrelated to the attacks altogether. Despite the lack of definitive proof, a court ruling in 2008 declared her a victim of the September 11th attacks, allowing her name to be added to the memorial, a legal conclusion that provided symbolic closure without resolving the underlying mystery. In the chaotic days following the attacks, fear and confusion dominated public life, and one of the most controversial actions taken during that period involved the evacuation of members of the bin Laden family from the United States. Although all commercial flights were grounded nationwide, 12 relatives of Osama bin Laden who were in the country at the time were flown back to Saudi Arabia on September 13th, an action that later provoked outrage when it became public. Critics questioned why relatives of the man responsible for the deadliest terrorist attack in history were permitted to leave while thousands of ordinary travelers remained stranded, fueling suspicions of preferential treatment and hidden political relationships. Government officials later stated that the evacuation was conducted for safety reasons, noting that most of the individuals involved were students or business people with no ties to terrorism, yet details surrounding the decision-making process have never been fully disclosed, leaving lingering doubts. Questions about who knew what before the attacks have remained central to public discourse. And one of the most scrutinized figures in this regard is Omar al-Bayoumi, a Saudi national suspected of having intelligence connections who provided assistance to two future hijackers when they arrived in San Diego in early 2000. Bayoumi helped Khalid al-Midhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi find housing, offered financial support, and maintained contact with individuals linked to extremist networks. Yet by the time of the attacks he was no longer in the United States, claiming to be pursuing academic studies in the United Kingdom. He was arrested 10 days after September 11th in a joint American and British operation, but was released due to insufficient evidence and later returned to Saudi Arabia, where he disappeared from public view entirely. An assessment by the Federal Bureau of Investigation later suggested a significant probability that Bayoumi had foreknowledge of the plot, but without access to him or new evidence, the case has effectively stalled, leaving another critical question unresolved. Intelligence failures are a recurring theme in the story of September 11th, and perhaps no example illustrates this more starkly than the revelation that two of the hijackers once lived with an undercover FBI informant in San Diego. The informant, whose identity remains classified, prayed with the men, helped them adjust to life in the United States, and assisted with basic logistical tasks such as opening bank accounts, yet never reported their names to his handler. At the same time, the Central Intelligence Agency had already identified both men as potential threats due to their attendance at an al-Qaeda meeting in Malaysia, but that information was not effectively shared with the FBI, highlighting a catastrophic breakdown in interagency communication. By the time an alert identifying the men as suspected terrorists was issued in late August 2001, the opportunity to intervene had long passed. Not all unresolved questions from that day are directly connected to terrorism. Some are tragedies that were overshadowed by the sheer scale of the attacks, such as the unsolved murder of Henryk Siwiak, a Polish immigrant who was shot and killed in Brooklyn on the night of September 11th. Siwiak, who spoke limited English, had been given incorrect directions while searching for a job opportunity and ended up in a high-crime neighborhood, where he was fatally shot under unclear circumstances. With law enforcement resources overwhelmingly focused on the disaster in Manhattan, his case received little attention. Number suspect was identified, and no weapon was recovered, leaving his death unresolved more than 20 years later. In the aftermath of the attacks, fear and suspicion led to false accusations and long-lasting conspiracy theories, including claims that Israeli intelligence agents had foreknowledge of the attacks. These allegations were fueled by the detention of several Israeli nationals near the World Trade Center shortly after the attacks, whom some claimed were celebrating the destruction. Subsequent investigations found no evidence supporting these claims, concluding that the men were likely intelligence operatives monitoring extremist threats who were detained amid heightened security and later deported. Yet the lack of transparency allowed the story to persist in fringe circles for decades. Claims of foreknowledge also emerged in unexpected places, such as a New York high school classroom where a student reportedly joked days before the attacks that the World Trade Center would soon be gone. After September 11th, authorities investigated the comment but found no links between the student and the hijackers, ultimately concluding that it was an unfortunate coincidence amplified by hindsight and shock. Perhaps the most unsettling allegation involves the possibility of insider trading. The idea that individuals with advanced knowledge of the attacks profited by selling airline and insurance stocks beforehand. Unusually high trading volumes involving major airlines were recorded in the days leading up to September 11th, prompting investigations by financial regulators and intelligence agencies. Analysts eventually attributed the trades to publicly circulated investment strategies and found no direct evidence of foreknowledge, though independent researchers have continued to argue that some transactions remain difficult to explain through normal market behavior alone. Damaged computer hard drives recovered from the ruins of the World Trade Center were later examined as part of these investigations, but authorities stated that no actionable evidence of insider trading was discovered and no charges were ever filed. Decades later, the official conclusions remain unchanged, yet the absence of definitive answers continues to fuel speculation. Taken together, these unresolved details do not prove the existence of a hidden mastermind or grand conspiracy. But they do reveal a complex pattern of missed warnings, intelligence failures, bureaucratic inertia, and human tragedy on a scale that overwhelmed existing systems. The story of September 11th is not only a story of terrorism, but also a reminder that even the most investigated event in modern history can leave behind unanswered questions that resist closure, ensuring that the search for understanding continues long after the smoke has cleared.